Vincent van Gogh. Who was he really? Today I will be informing you about the life of Vincent van Gogh, a well-known artist who lived a life not many know about. The reason I began researching and discovering who he really was at a young age I was very interested in art. I began taking up interests that would pursue art, and then I also began to be interested in the artists themselves. I began researching people like Claude Monet, Da Vinci, and other people like that. And then I also discovered along the way Vincent van Gogh. Now, he is a very troublesome individual. His story has been told through centuries and has been mistold for a very long time as well. And I will definitely be shedding light on things that people tell the truth about and what they don't really know. I will be going through his early life and his teenage years until his adult years, and then also be discussing his art and how his mental instability was portrayed through that as well. And then I will also talk about the most controversial thing about him, which was his death, because many don't know if it was murder, suicide, and there's just many different routes we can take with that, but I will be discussing both sides and why either one. So let's begin exploring his troublesome life. Vincent van Gogh, known to be one of the greatest artists of all time. But from his childhood, you wouldn't be able to predict such outcome. For starters, his family was not financially able to support themselves. So before I begin talking about all that, I'd like to actually read a portion of biography.com. It was part of an article, and it talks about when he was born, his parents, and I thought it'd be helpful to read it straight from there due to there was very difficult names, so I thought it'd be best to just read it from the article. So it says, Vincent van Gogh was born Vincent William van Gogh on March 30th, 1853, in Groot, Zunderburg, Netherlands. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was an austere country minister, and his mother, Anna Cornelia Carbontus, was a moody artist whose love of nature, drawing, and watercolors was transferred to her son. Van Gogh was born exactly 1 year after his parents' first son, also named Vincent, but was stillborn. So with that in mind, it kind of foreshadows the tragedies that occur in his lifetime. At age 15, he had to leave school and go to work because his family just needed the money, and so he ended up working at his uncle's art dealership. And after working at the art dealership, he transferred to Gogh Gallery in London, and there he met his landlady's daughter, and her name was Eugenie Lawyer. And Van Gogh was completely infatuated with her and wanted to know more, and eventually fell in love with her. So he asked her to marry him, and she denied the marriage, and then he spiraled into a depression. He became very just upset and was by himself, so he ended up throwing away all of his books. The only book he kept was the Bible. And when this all occurred, it began his interest into becoming a minister and just working through the church. So he got fired from his gallery job because he was telling people that the art was worthless, and plain out he was telling his customers that, so it got him fired. After that, he taught at a Methodist boys' church, and there he also preached to the congregation. And with his dream of becoming a minister, he knew he had to take an entrance exam. And after a year of deliberately studying for this exam, when he went to take it, he realized there was a Latin portion of the test. And this Latin test, he denied to take it because he said that Latin was a dead language, thus denying entrance into the exam. So after this, he went, and the same thing happened at the Church of Belgium. So he began preaching in the southern portion of a coal mine in Belgium. And usually when you go there as a minister, you're there to be punished. However, he went there and he taught the sick and the ill and their families. And he would actually, when he went there, would draw the miners and their families. And he then became known as the Christ of coal mines. But he was then fired because his lifestyle did not fit the one that they desired for that job. So in 1880, he moved to Brussels, and he wanted to begin his life as an artist. However, he did not have the money to do so. So his brother Theo loaned him money that he would be able to go and learn about art and buy supplies and do anything that he needed to become an artist. Vincent van Gogh had an interest in troublesome women. So he actually fell in love with his cousin, but when his cousin found out, she fled. And then he fell in love with a woman named Clisina Maria Hornick, and she was an alcoholic prostitute. And when she went back to prostitution, Van Gogh became very depressed because she was his mistress and also model. So he fled back to the Netherlands, and when he went back there, he was very depressed, and his family actually said that if he did not get over Hornick, that they would not give him any more money to fund him for his art. So when he went to the Netherlands, he went off and just would paint the people around the town and also the landscape. So I will then now begin discussing his art. After a rough childhood, Van Gogh turned to art as his escape, and in 1885 he began work on his first real masterpiece, which was called Potato Eaters. And after he became really into the art, he decided he wanted to move to Paris. However, Theo did not think it was a good idea because Impressionism was a huge trend there, and that was not what Van Gogh was doing. So he did not listen to his brother and ended up moving in with him uninvited into Paris. When he discovered Impressionism, he fell in love with it. He loved the color and light, and even his friends would all pose for each other, and that's how they would save money, is they would paint each other. In February of 1888, he moved to France, and he lived in this little yellow house where he was able to paint whatever and do whatever he wanted. He spent actually most of his money on paint rather than food. He lived on coffee, bread, and absinthe. He became very sick and felt strained very often. It was evident that his physical and mental health was declining. And during this time, he is known to have eaten paint, which was true. It was on actually Quora.com. It discussed him eating paint and also his time in the asylum. So Theo gave a man named Paul Gogh, I believe is how you say it, money to watch over Van Gogh because he was very worried. But when Gogh was there, Van Gogh would fight with him, and actually one time fought with a razor. And after the fight, Van Gogh hired a prostitute named Rachel and offered his ear. He had his ear in one hand and a razor in the other, and said, "Keep this object carefully." So after that, he was hospitalized and released very often. And then people of Arles, where he was living at the time, thought he was dangerous, so they moved him to an asylum. And then in 1889, in November, he was offered to go to an exhibit in Brussels and put his art out there. And he put 6 of his art pieces into the gallery, and including Irises and Starry Night. So now we will also discuss his death. The death of Vincent van Gogh has interested millions, but does anyone really know the truth? July 27th of 1890, Van Gogh went out in the morning to paint as he always did. When he woke up, he would go out into the field and paint. However, this morning he had a loaded pistol on him. Now, this is where the controversy takes over, because when he came back, he had a bullet in his chest, and throughout the years, everyone just said it was suicide, as that is the more poetic and interesting version of the story. However, a new, interesting other side is actually quite intriguing, as it is decided that it may be murder, because when they found the bullet, it was pointed at an angle into his chest, and usually when it's suicide, it is straight inward, not at an angle. And how they thought it was murder was there was 2 teenage boys that were out in the field, and they played with the malfunctioning gun, and it was believed they were all drinking, and that they accidentally shot Van Gogh, and Van Gogh just claimed he shot himself, because he wanted to protect the young boys. This controversy has been talked about in BBC News, Vanity Fair, and they have recently talked about it being murder and not the suicide. So Van Gogh died on October 12, 1890, and he was 37 years old. Once again, my goal today was to inform my audience on the life of Vincent van Gogh, a well-known artist whose life was very misinterpreted. Throughout our lives, we are introduced and exposed to many brilliant minds, and with that, we are told generalized stories on who people believe that they were. However, we must not believe everything that has been passed on for years. We must find out for ourselves what went on in the minds of our heroes. I wanted to thank everyone for listening today, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about the interesting life of Vincent van Gogh.